This is one such story. A tale of innocence stolen, of unanswered questions, and of a darkness that hides in plain sight. In the summer of 1925, in the seemingly peaceful town of Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, an 8-year-old boy named Arthur Schumacher Jr. left his home one warm July morning. He should have returned by nightfall. He should have been tucked into bed, safe beneath the comfort of his family's roof. But instead, his laughter vanished into silence, and the town would never be the same again. What happened to Buddy Schumacher remains one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in small-town America. It is not a legend. It is not a ghost story whispered around campfires. It is real, documented in newspapers, police records, and the haunted voices of those who lived through it. And even now, almost a century later, the horror still lingers, echoing across generations. Buddy was, by all accounts, a typical boy. He loved baseball, adventure, and the simple pleasures of running through the streets with his friends. He was mischievous, but kind, adored by his parents, Arthur and Elsie Schumacher, and cherished by his younger siblings. His father worked hard, his mother cared deeply, and their home, though modest, was filled with warmth. It was the kind of family that neighbors admired. A picture of small-town life in 1920s America. The summer of 1925 was unusually hot. Wauwatosa, though close to Milwaukee, still held a sense of small-town charm. Tree-lined streets, children playing until dusk, the rhythmic sound of trains passing through. It all painted the image of safety, but beneath that picture-perfect surface, something sinister was waiting. Something no one could see until it was too late. On the morning of July 24th, Buddy joined his friends for a day of play. They were boys being boys, wandering near the train tracks, exploring wooded areas, daring one another to go a little farther, to test the limits of their courage. It was a world before constant parental supervision, when freedom seemed harmless, when danger was invisible. The boys laughed, shouted, and ran under the summer sun, unaware that one of them would never come home. As the hours passed, the boys scattered. Some returned to their homes, some lingered near the tracks, but Buddy vanished. At first, no one noticed. After all, in a small town it was common for children to play until the evening bells rang. But when darkness began to settle, and Buddy did not return, unease crept into the Schumacher home. Her mother waited at the door, her eyes searching the road. His father paced restlessly, telling himself that Buddy was surely just late, that he'd come bounding home, flushed with excitement and stories of the day. But the door never opened. Buddy never returned, and by nightfall, the Schumacher family knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. Neighbors joined the search. Voices called out into the night, carrying Buddy's name into the woods, across the tracks, through every street in Wauwatosa. Lanterns swung in the dark. The sound of footsteps rustled against the earth, but there was no answer, only silence, heavy and suffocating, as though the town itself was holding its breath. By morning, the search grew desperate. Police became involved. Newspapers spread the word. The entire town seemed to be looking for the missing boy, but with each passing hour, hope dimmed. And then, days turned into weeks. The mystery deepened, and whispers of something darker began to stir. The days following Buddy's disappearance were a blur of dread. Families kept their children closer. Doors that had never known locks were suddenly bolted at night. Conversations at grocery stores and church pews always circled back to the same chilling question: where was Buddy? The Schumacher family clung to hope. His mother, Elsie, barely slept. She would sit at the window in the quiet hours of the night, staring down the road as if sheer willpower could bring her son back home. His father searched relentlessly, joining police officers and volunteers as they combed through fields, creeks, and abandoned shacks. Posters with Buddy's face went up. A reward was offered, but each lead dissolved into nothing. Some claimed to have seen him near the rail yards. Others whispered that a drifter might have taken him. Rumors swelled, but the truth remained hidden. For 37 long days, the town lived under a shadow. 37 nights of parents checking their children twice before bed. 37 mornings of uncertainty, dread, and whispered prayers. And then the search ended. On September 5th, 1925, a group of boys playing near the woods stumbled upon something that froze their laughter. At first they thought it was a pile of discarded clothes tangled in the brush, but as they drew closer, the truth became horrifyingly clear. The small body of Arthur Buddy Schumacher Jr. lay hidden in the undergrowth, his clothes torn, his body battered, and worst of all, he had been there the entire time, just a short distance from where hundreds had searched. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, striking terror into the hearts of every parent in Wauwatosa. The idyllic vision of their town shattered in an instant. Buddy had not simply wandered away. He had been taken, brutalized, murdered. The authorities rushed to investigate, but what they found only deepened the horror. Buddy's body showed signs of a violent struggle. His shoes were missing, his shirt was torn, the brutality was undeniable, and yet there were no clear answers. No footprints, no witnesses, no conclusive evidence that pointed to a single suspect. The Schumachers were devastated. Elsie collapsed when the police delivered the news. Arthur Sr. stood in silence, his face pale, his body trembling, as though the weight of the world had crushed him. A piece of their family was gone, ripped away in the most merciless way imaginable. And in its place was only grief and the echo of unanswered questions. The funeral drew the entire town. Hundreds gathered to mourn the little boy who had once run so freely through their streets. The church was filled with sobs, the air heavy with sorrow and fear. Parents clutched their children tighter, unwilling to let them stray even an inch. Buddy's small casket was lowered into the ground, but with it did not go peace. Instead, suspicion, paranoia, and dread began to root. The police launched an investigation, but in 1925, without modern forensic tools, progress was agonizingly slow. They questioned neighbors, friends, drifters, and anyone who might have crossed Buddy's path that fateful day. Fingers were pointed, accusations flew. Some believed a stranger had wandered into town. Others whispered that the killer might be someone they knew, someone they trusted, someone who smiled and waved as though nothing had happened. The uncertainty was unbearable. Each man in town seemed a possible suspect. Each shadow seemed to hide a predator. And the longer the case went unsolved, the stronger the whispers became. Buddy's killer was still among them. Weeks turned into months, and the investigation yielded no answers. Police claimed they were close to solving it, but no one was arrested. The newspapers sensationalized the case, turning Buddy's name into grim headlines that only added fuel to the fire of fear. The Schumachers, drowning in grief, withdrew from much of the town. Elsie could barely leave her home, her heart forever broken. Arthur Sr. threw himself into work, though his eyes carried the weight of unbearable sorrow. Their lives, once ordinary, had been transformed into a nightmare. But the real horror was not just the crime itself. It was the silence that followed. The way the case dragged on without resolution, the way a child's life could be so brutally ended, and yet the world continued. Trains still rumbled through the town. Children still played in the streets, though now under wary eyes. The sun still rose and set, as if mocking the grief of those left behind. And so Buddy's murder became more than a crime. It became a wound in the heart of Wauwatosa, a reminder that even the most peaceful town can harbor unthinkable darkness. A reminder that monsters do not always hide in shadows. They walk among us, unnoticed, until it is too late. After Buddy's body was discovered, grief soon gave way to suspicion. The town of Wauwatosa was small, close-knit, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name. Mothers pulled their children closer when a stranger smiled too kindly. The question lingered like a ghost in every conversation. Who killed Buddy Schumacher? The police turned their attention to those closest to Buddy first. Friends who had played with him that summer afternoon were questioned over and over again. The boys swore they had last seen Buddy near the train tracks, laughing, full of life. But after that, he had simply vanished. Did one of them know more than they let on? Were they hiding something? Or had a darker presence stolen Buddy away the moment he strayed too far? One man in particular drew suspicion. His name was Edward Scotty Ferguson, a railroad worker with a violent temper and a reputation for cruelty. Some claimed he had been seen near the woods the day Buddy disappeared. Others whispered that he often wandered the tracks at odd hours, muttering to himself. The police interrogated him, pressing for details, but Ferguson denied everything. And without evidence, without witnesses, they could not hold him. He walked free. Then there was the drifter theory. The train yards near Wauwatosa often brought strangers passing through, men with no ties, no roots, no one to vouch for their whereabouts. Could Buddy have crossed paths with one of these men, a predator slipping silently into town, committing a crime too horrific to fathom, and vanishing just as quickly? It was possible. But again, no one could prove it. The drifters came and went, their faces forgotten, their names unknown. Some even suspected that Buddy's killer was not a stranger at all, but someone within the community, a neighbor, a teacher, a friend. The thought sent a shiver down every spine. If the murderer lived among them, then every handshake, every polite smile could be a mask hiding a monster. The fear ate at the town like rot, breeding paranoia and mistrust. The case was soon clouded by conflicting stories. Witnesses contradicted one another. Some said they saw Buddy boarding a train. Others swore he was dragged into the woods. Rumors grew, twisted, and multiplied. The truth was lost in a storm of speculation. The newspapers made it worse. Headlines screamed of the boy in the woods, painting lurid details, exaggerating rumors, and fanning the flames of fear. Reporters speculated about kidnappers, sadists, and serial killers. Each article seemed to offer new theories, but none brought the Schumacher family closer to justice. Weeks turned into months, and the investigation grew colder. The suspects, neighbors, drifters, even family acquaintances were questioned, but nothing stuck. The evidence was thin, circumstantial, fading with time. The brutal truth was that in 1925, without fingerprints, DNA, or modern forensic science, the police were nearly blind. And so the town remained trapped in uncertainty. Parents no longer let their children roam freely. The woods, once a place of adventure, became a place of dread. The train tracks that had carried laughter that summer now carried only whispers of horror. The community was fractured. Trust, once so abundant, was gone. For the Schumacher family, the agony was unrelenting. Every rumor was a knife twist deeper. Every false lead was another wound. They sat through endless interrogations, endured the gossip of neighbors, and lived with the knowledge that their son's killer might never be caught. Some said Elsie never recovered. Her eyes, once bright, seemed forever clouded by sorrow. She could no longer stand the sound of children laughing. It reminded her of the laughter that she had lost. Arthur Sr. carried himself with stoic silence, but friends noticed the way his hands trembled, the way his voice cracked when he spoke about Buddy. The tragedy hollowed them out, leaving only shadows of the parents they once were. The most haunting part of it all was the silence. The killer had left no clear trail, no confession, no closure. He had taken a life and melted back into the world unseen. Somewhere, whether in Wauwatosa or beyond, Buddy's murderer continued to breathe, to walk, to live, as though nothing had happened. The years after Buddy Schumacher's murder were marked by silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that festers, a silence heavy with unanswered questions, with grief that never softened, with fear that never left. The town of Wauwatosa moved forward on the surface, but beneath the polite greetings and Sunday church services, there lingered an unease that time could not erase. For the Schumacher family, the agony was unrelenting. His room was left untouched for months, his small belongings arranged just as he had left them, his favorite marbles, his shoes scuffed from play, the school books he would never open again. Each object was both a memory and a reminder of what had been stolen. Elsie, his mother, was said to wander the house late at night, touching his things, whispering his name, as though calling him back from the void. Neighbors avoided talking about the murder, some out of respect, others out of fear. Parents told their children to stay close, to never stray near the tracks, to never wander into the woods alone. A shadow had been cast over the innocence of the town. Childhood freedom, the joy of running until dusk, of playing without boundaries, was gone. In its place was caution, paranoia, a loss of trust. The case itself faded from the headlines. The police, overwhelmed by the lack of evidence, eventually let their pursuit slip into stillness. Suspects were dismissed one by one, files were boxed up and stored. What had once been the most urgent mystery in Wauwatosa became a ghost story, whispered only in hushed voices. But for the Buddy descendants, the pain lived on. Stories of Buddy are passed down like whispered warnings, a way to remember a boy who should have grown up, who should have filled a home with laughter, who should have run freely through a safe town. Instead, his name has become a symbol of what can happen when innocence is taken too soon. Even decades later, the echoes of that summer refused to fade. The tracks where Buddy once played, now overgrown and silent, seemed almost alive, an unspoken witness to the horror that had unfolded there. Locals who walked those paths at twilight reported an uneasy feeling, as though unseen eyes were watching, waiting. Footsteps sometimes answered their own, soft and deliberate, yet impossible to locate. Historians revisiting the case discovered small, unsettling details that had been overlooked. Notes in police files, a shadow that moved too quickly, a stranger asking too many questions, a faint cry carried on the wind that no one could trace. Every detail, though inconclusive, fed the imagination, fueling a sense that the tragedy was not entirely confined to the past. Some speculated that the killer had chosen Wauwatosa for its apparent innocence, a place where children ran free, where adults trusted strangers, where the sunlit streets masked the potential for darkness. The audacity of such a crime in such a community added to its horror. Buddy had been an ordinary boy, yet his death became an extraordinary symbol of vulnerability, a reminder that evil often strikes when least expected. Psychologists studying the case later suggested that the town itself carried trauma passed from parent to child. Parents told their stories, not just of Buddy, but of fear of wandering too far,